The story begins with a wealthy businessman named Fu Xian returning home from a business trip. Suddenly, his car comes to a halt after colliding with someone. In the next scene, we see a girl named Yun waking up in the hospital. She learns from Xian's assistant that she collided with their car, but fortunately, she's okay with no major injuries. At this point, we see Xian, who is a disabled man who uses a wheelchair all the time. Once everything's sorted out, Sahan offers to drive Yun home safely. The latter's a bit skeptical at first, but after some insisting, she agrees. It turns out that she's from a wealthy family as well. When she gets home, she hears some commotion, so she quickly thanks Sihan and heads inside. Surprisingly, Yun discovers that her stepmother and stepsister have arrived there and are pestering her mother to sign some documents. This enrages her, so she slaps her stepsister, Jintan, and tells her mother that they're trying to rob her. Unfortunately, Jintan also gets aggressive and grabs a shard of broken pottery, ready to attack Yun. But just in time, Shihan and his assistant arrive to stop her. Still, the stepmother's drama continues as she takes a shard and threatens to kill herself. Shihan then informs her that they have recorded her threat, so her death will be seen as self-inflicted. This finally forces the stepmother and stepsister to back down and leave the house. Following the incident, Yun thanks Sahan for saving her. Our hero mentions that she owes him a favor, but she argues that they're even because he accidentally hit her. The assistant then says that the CCTV footage will prove she crossed the road at the red light and collided with their car. After this, Sahan gives Yun his card and asks her to call him. That night, Sahan eagerly waits for Yun's message, and when she texts him, he's overjoyed. Meanwhile, Yun hears her parents arguing and goes to their room. We learn that her stepfather is the chair of the Yi group, which belongs to her mother's family. He wants his biological daughter, Jintan, to come live with them. Yun then tells her mother to pack their belongings so they can return to their grandfather's place. This scares the stepfather, so he agrees not to mention Jintan again and to cut ties with his mistress. Following this, Yun says that she wants to intern at Yi Group. However, to keep her away from financial matters, her stepfather says she can work as a waitress in their restaurant. The following day, Yun begins her job at the restaurant. Sahan visits her and inquires about her engagement to the Lin family's son. This suddenly reminds her that she's supposed to meet with the Lin family today, so she hastily leaves without responding to Sahan's question. Upon reaching home, she meets with her prospective fiancé, Lin Zi. Without even consulting her, the two families quickly arrange their engagement for the following day. However, Yun isn't pleased with this decision, so she lures Lindsay into her room and starts seducing him. When he starts getting close to her, she suddenly begins screaming. Yun then informs his father, Mr. Lin, that he tried to molest her. As a result, the poor guy is badly scolded. Not only that, but after the meeting, Yun follows Lindsay to a hotel where he's visiting his stepsister, Jintan. She manages to take an intimate photo of the two together. But she's not done yet. She orders a strong bottle of wine to be sent to their room. Lindsay and Jintan both enjoy the wine and each other's company, while Yun listens outside their door. Out of nowhere, Sahan and his assistant appear. They ask what she's up to, but she brushes off the question and wishes them a happy Children's Day. When she realizes that the hotel belongs to Sahan, she gets nervous and quickly leaves. The next day, it's Yun and Lindsay's engagement party, but the latter hasn't shown up yet because he's still fast asleep from the potent wine. With her fiancé absent, Yun steps forward and confidently announces that the engagement is off. Mr. Lin tries to explain that Lindsay is stuck in traffic, but Yun shocks the guests by showing them photos of her fiancé getting cozy with Jintan. She declares herself single and open to other eligible suitors in the city. Suddenly, Sahan once again arrives at the scene and expresses his interest in Yun. Her stepfather agrees immediately, but Yun hesitates, saying she needs some time to think. This leaves Sahan hurt, as he suspects her hesitation is due to his disability. Later, Lin Zi, who's fueled by revenge, confronts Yun and humiliates her for acting superior when her mother is just a mistress. This angers Yun, and she slaps him. He tries to attack her as well, but thankfully, Sahan's assistant appears just in time to teach him a lesson. After this, Sahan arranges a romantic dinner by booking an entire restaurant just for him and Yun. Despite our girl listing numerous reasons why they may not be a good match, Sahan persists, telling her he really wants to be with her. He assures Yun that he won't pressure her and gives her the time she needs to think things over. Meanwhile, Jintan feels bad for Lin Zi and makes the bold decision to hire someone to kill Yun. But since she lacks the money, the plan is changed to simply harassing her. The next day, two thugs arrive at the restaurant demanding Western soup from Yun, which the place does not serve. They then degrade her by pouring water over her head. Before leaving, the thugs even threaten to return to the restaurant frequently and harass her. After they finally depart, Yun is still trembling with fear, and just then, Sahan calls her. He then sends her a beautiful white dress and invites her to join him for dinner. During their meal, Sahan notices Yun's anxiety and asks what's troubling her, but she falsely claims she's okay. Later, Yun's stepfather starts looking for the prenup agreement he signed, which states that he won't receive any money in the divorce if he cheats on Yun's mother. Moments later, Yun catches him in her mother's room, searching her bookshelves for the document. Later, our heroine warns her trusting mother to be careful of her husband's actions, but her mother still has faith in her husband, believing he would never betray her. The next day, the thugs return to the restaurant, demanding lamb soup once again. They start intimidating Yun, but she doesn't get scared this time and beats both of them brutally. However, she also sustains some injuries in the process. Later on, Jahan takes her to his home to tend to her wounds, and this is when she finally tells him about the thugs. Jahan regrets not sending his assistant for her protection, but Yun assures him that she's all right. He then suggests she stay the night at his place. He tucks her into bed and kisses her. This makes Yun blush, and Jahan wishes her a good night. The scene then changes to the thugs who are getting scolded by Lin Zi for getting beaten by a girl. Suddenly, Jahan arrives with his assistant and threatens them for hurting his girlfriend. The thugs apologize, but Lin Zi offers them money to attack Jahan. Surprisingly, the thugs reject this offer and start beating up Lin Zi instead. After this, Jahan comes back to his home and sleeps beside Yun. The following morning, they're seen sleeping together closely. Yun wakes up and she's mesmerized by his looks. When Jahan wakes up, he starts teasing her, making her blush and run away. Later, the two have breakfast together. Yun then mentions that she should leave because her mother might be worried about her. When she returns home, she discovers her mother crying, telling her that she found out the truth about her greedy husband. She received a call from the bank, revealing that he'd been transferring their assets into his account. Her mother apologizes to Yun for not being able to provide her with a happier family life. In response, Yun comforts her mother and assures her that she will protect her. In the following scene, Yun meets Jahan again and offers him chocolates as a thank you gesture. However, he reveals that he doesn't like them. This prompts Yun to give the chocolates to his assistant, but Jahan gets so jealous that he takes her hand and decides to eat the chocolate himself. Seeing this, our heroine becomes shy, causing her to quickly run away from the moment. As Yun heads outside, she accidentally bumps into her stepsister. Yun tries to leave, but Jatan stops her, starting a senseless argument. She even mocks Jahan for his appearance. Hearing this, Yun becomes furious and shoves Jatan, causing her to fall to the muddy ground. She further tries to beat her, but just then, Jahan's assistant arrives and stops her. The scene then shifts to Yun's stepfather with his mistress, who is crying and pleading with him to divorce Yun's mother. However, he tells her that he can't divorce her just yet because they won't get any property in that case. So, they will need to devise a new strategy and transfer all the assets and money into their names before divorce. Suddenly, Jintan arrives at the house, covered in mud and crying. Her father asks what happened, and she reveals that Yun harassed and humiliated her. Hearing this, the father becomes enraged and he returns to the home to confront Yun. He demands she apologize to Jintan, but when she refuses, he begins yelling at her violently. Just then, Yun's mother appears and defends her daughter. She demands that he sign the divorce papers, claiming she no longer wants to be with him. Scared, he changes his demeanor and begins apologizing and pleading with her to be with him. Yun's mother then tosses the divorce papers in his face, but he still refuses to divorce her and storms out. The next day, Yun and her mother meet with their financial manager, who is also one of the shareholders of her company. Yun's mother says that she wants to conduct an audit of the company's financial accounts. The manager agrees to her request and asks them to visit the office on Monday. However, the manager later calls Yun's stepfather and informs him about this. It turns out the two are conspiring together. Later, while Yun is alone in the parking lot, an unknown man begins to follow her. She starts rushing, and when she looks back, she sees no one. She then becomes terrified and flees, only to run into Sahan's bodyguard. In her terror, she begins hitting him without looking, while Sahan laughs at her. Afterward, Sahan takes Yun to choose a dress for an upcoming party. Yun is thrilled when she arrives in the room filled with many pretty dresses. After some time, she finally picks a lovely dress and steps outside wearing it. Sahan is mesmerized by her beauty and he compliments her. However, unknown to them, the mysterious person is secretly recording their interaction. Later, the mysterious man heads to his car, but Sahan's assistant arrives and forcefully takes the phone from his hand. He then warns the man to stay away from both Sahan and Yun from now on. Later, while dropping Yun home, she surprises Sahan by kissing him. After she leaves, Sahan's assistant tells him that Yun may be in danger and that they should help her. In the next scene, Yun and her mother arrive at the office to meet the manager. However, the latter secretly calls Yun's stepfather and informs him about it. It turns out Yun's stepfather wants them to be occupied at the office so he can search for the prenup agreement in their house. But shortly after, Yun starts to grow suspicious of the manager's intentions, so she takes her mother and leaves the office. Back at home, Yun's stepfather manages to find the prenup document and tears it up. When Yun and her mother return home, he smugly sits in front of them and states that he's ready for a divorce. When Yun's mother retrieves the document, she is shocked to discover that the papers are blank. The stepfather begins to rejoice, but Yun reveals that the actual document is with her. He tears up that document as well, but Yun says she has multiple copies of it. The stepfather then becomes desperate and claims that he now controls all the company's shares, so Yun and her stepmother must accept him if they don't want to become homeless. However, Yun is one step ahead of him and reveals that she had all of his accounts frozen. In a flashback, it's revealed that Sahan had already purchased the entire company and frozen the stepfather's accounts. As a last resort, the stepfather begs Yun's mother not to divorce him, but Sahan arrives and kicks him out. In the next scene, it's the day of Sahan and Yun's engagement. Yun is all dressed up and eagerly waiting, but as time ticks on, Sahan is nowhere to be seen. She grows increasingly worried, but suddenly she notices him walking towards her. He shares that ever since he met her, he's been undergoing intense training, and now he can finally walk. Sahan claims that her love has healed him, and Yun feels emotional hearing this. The story concludes on a happy note as Yun and Sahan finally get engaged. The following story begins with Yun, a bright girl who is a struggling comic artist with dreams of becoming famous one day. On the other hand, we have Fu Xian, who is a disabled wealthy businessman from the city's most prominent family. Yun is inspired by Sahan to make a love comic that will attract more readers, given his immense popularity among girls. To achieve this, she decides to see him in person to make sure her comic's protagonist closely resembles him. While Yun is spying on him, Sahan's assistant notices her there and asks her what she wants. Startled, she hastily runs away but ends up colliding with none other than Sahan himself. Embarrassed, she accidentally spills her ice cream on him before hurriedly running away. Later, Sahan discovers someone is using his image for personal gain, so he decides to take action on the matter. The next morning, Yun's boss urgently summons her to the office, claiming there's a problem. She races there on her motorcycle, but accidentally crashes into a car, which turns out to be Sahan's. His assistant suspects she's following them and threatens to call the police, but Sahan steps in and tells his assistant to let her go. Upon arriving at work, Yun finds out from her boss that Sahan has filed a lawsuit against them for using his image in their comic. He then says that he can't deal with this since he's facing financial difficulties, and he's also responsible for caring for his little daughter, whose mother abandoned them. Hearing this, Yun feels bad, so she assures him that she will speak with Sahan and settle the matter. Sometime later, Yun arrives at Sahan's company to talk with him. However, the security guard doesn't let her in and informs her that she must have an appointment first, and the wait time is several months. Since she can't wait that long, Yun disguises herself as a delivery person and sneaks past the guard. On the first floor, she meets Sahan and his assistant. Just as the guard rushes in, she falls to the ground, and Sahan helps her up. This makes her happy, but surprisingly, Sahan sends her out of there immediately. Still, she doesn't give up and decides to wait for him in the parking lot. But the guard notices her there as well, so she hides in the trunk of Sahan's car. When they arrive home, Yun manages to escape quickly and enters Sahan's lavish home. As she tries to sneak past the assistant, she comes across Sahan again. She then quickly covers his mouth so he doesn't scream and asks him to drop the lawsuit. However, he immediately activates the alarm, and upon hearing it, his assistant arrives, so Sahan orders him to kick her out. At that moment, Sahan's aunt, Miss Fu, arrives at the house, so the assistant goes to distract her. Sahan informs Yun that he will drop the lawsuit in exchange for help, and she assumes he's making an indecent proposal. Just then, Miss Fu walks into the room and asks Sahan why he missed the blind date she set up. Fed up with her pressure to get married, Sahan introduces Yun to his aunt and informs her that she is his girlfriend. Miss Fu doesn't believe this, so Yun pretends to feel nauseated to hint that she's pregnant. Seeing this, Miss Fu tells her that she's shameless and walks off. After this, Yun assumes that her help will lead Sahan to drop the lawsuit. However, this doesn't happen, and he kicks her out. The following day, Miss Fu meets with Sahan's grandfather and complains about his pregnant girlfriend. However, Sahan clarifies that this isn't the case and that he and his girlfriend are simply dating. Not wanting to upset his grandpa, Sahan makes up a story that his girlfriend is from the affluent and influential Yen family. His grandfather is thrilled by this news, and Sahan assures him that he will introduce her to him the next day. Later, Yun is caring for her sick mother in the hospital when Sehan's assistant arrives looking for her. Sehan makes her a proposal that if she pretends to be his fiancé, he will drop the lawsuit. He also promises to provide her with a large sum of money and cover all of her mother's medical needs. To solve all her problems at once, Yun agrees to sign the contract with him. The next day, Sehan brings Yun to meet his grandfather, who is delighted to see her. However, Miss Fu tries to spoil the moment by accusing them of lying. She claims to have a picture of the Yen's family's real daughter and that Yun doesn't resemble her. She then shows him the photograph of a little girl, but the grandfather informs her that people change with time. After a successful meeting with the grandfather, Sehan suggests to Yun that she should stay with him to avoid suspicion. She happily agrees, relieved she won't have to worry about rent anymore. In her new spacious room, Yun enjoys the newfound happiness and freedom. Later on, she starts singing and dancing loudly in the bathroom. Sehan gets irritated by the noise and goes to complain. However, just as he approaches, he hears her slip and fall. Concerned, he rushes in to help, but Yun feels embarrassed and starts screaming, causing Sehan to quickly leave. The next morning, both Yun and Sehan are feeling embarrassed about the bathroom incident. However, just then, a team of stylists arrive to give Yun a makeover for a girls-only party organized by Miss Fu. After the makeover, Yun looks very pretty, and Sehan is completely speechless when he sees her. Later at the party, Yun meets some mean girls who mock her and even spill wine on her dress. But then a woman appears and defends Yun from them and also helps her remove the stain from her dress. She turns out to be Kim Ji-woo, who is a well-known TV actress. She's kind to Yun and even lends her shawl to hide her stain. A while later, we learn that Kim has no good motives and plans to further humiliate Yun. Meanwhile, Yun notices some vulgar remarks on the shawl Kim gave her, so she goes outside and hands the shawl back to her, asking her to wear it herself. Miss Fu then scolds Yun for insulting her guest, but suddenly Sehan arrives and defends her by criticizing his aunt. Seeing this, Yun becomes happy, and they decide to return home. The next day, Yun goes to the hospital to visit her mother, but notices Kim is following her. So she enters the obstetrics department and begins shouting that the famous actress Kim Ji-woo is here. When they hear this, a large crowd gathers and surrounds Kim. Later inside her mother's room, Yun finds her playing an online game with a boy named Chu-bae, who is her mother's roommate and is disabled. Yun and Chu-bae decide to have a playful competition to determine who is better, and in the end, Yun ends up winning. The following day, Sehan is harassed by the press who begin to accuse him of getting Kim pregnant due to her hospital visit the other day. So to silence them, he tells them that Yun is his girlfriend and gives her a sweet kiss. Afterward, Yun is enraged and informs him that he stole her first kiss. She breaks into tears, but Sehan's assistant comforts her by revealing that it is also Sehan's first kiss. Embarrassed, our hero asks his assistant to stay quiet. Later, Sehan's grandpa is concerned about the speculations regarding Sehan and Kim's relationship. So, to convince him, our lovely pair pretends to be more in love than ever. Meanwhile, Miss Fu is still plotting on how to destroy them so that she can keep the inheritance. Later on, Sehan finds himself unable to stop thinking about the kiss with Yun. He's already fallen in love with her, and his assistant notices and teases him about it. The following day, Chu-bae is preparing to be discharged from the hospital. Yun's mother then tells Yun that Chu-bae is such a good match for her and requests that she treat him to dinner. Afterward, Yun meets the boy outside the hospital. It seems that he likes her and invites her for a meal. Just then, Sehan unexpectedly arrives and becomes jealous upon seeing them together. Yun introduces both men, but the atmosphere grows tense. Chu-bae challenges Sehan to a wheelchair race, and the latter accepts. The competition soon starts, and Sehan ends up winning. After this, Chu-bae rises from his wheelchair in frustration and leaves angrily. Days later, it's Sehan's grandpa's birthday and everyone gathers to celebrate with him. Yun gives grandpa a thoughtful gift from his favorite artist and captures his heart even more. However, this gesture triggers jealousy in the heart of the evil Miss Fu. Suddenly, Chu-bae makes a dramatic entrance, capturing everyone's attention. It's revealed that he's the heir to the wealthy Chu family. Chu-bae invites Yun to dance with him, and after some pressure from him, she agrees. As the two dance, Sehan can't help but feel intense jealousy. He also feels regret over the inability to walk and dance with the girl he loves. Meanwhile, Yun confides in Chu-bae about her reason for pretending to be Sehan's fiancé and asks him to keep this a secret from her mother. Moments later, Kim arrives and enters the room where Sehan is. It turns out that she had spiked his drink earlier, causing him to pass out. She then tries to take advantage of the situation while Miss Fu is on her way with Grandpa to witness the scene. However, Yun suddenly arrives and strikes Kim unconscious. When Miss Fu and Grandpa eventually arrive, they see Sehan and Yun getting cozy with each other. When they leave, Yun sits on Sehan's lap, and the two of them eventually fall asleep together. The next morning when they wake up, Yun gets nervous fearing something happened between them. Sahan also teases her and insinuates that something did happen. During breakfast, he tells Yun that the terms of their contract are irrelevant now and she can do whatever she wants. He also asks her not to call him Mr. Sahan anymore. At that moment, Yun asks him what happened to his legs. Sahan reveals that he got into a car accident 7 years ago, in which he also lost his father. In the following scene, Sahan receives a phone call from someone and we learn that he's not actually disabled and is trying to find out who caused the accident. So he plans to go to the US to solve the issue without informing Yun for her own safety. That night, as Yun sleeps, Sahan quietly says goodbye and leaves. The following day, Yun asks for Sahan and is told by his assistant that he's on a trip, leaving her in charge of the company. Later at the office, Miss Fu tries to take over, but the assistant introduces Yun as the new acting CEO per Sahan's orders. Yun also receives support from the executives, causing Miss Fu to storm off in anger. However, the evil woman doesn't give up and starts spreading false accusations about Yun and even brings in the press to harm the company's reputation. Yun is worried about what to do, but thankfully, Chubei arrives just in time to help her. Together, they gather evidence and expose Miss Fu in front of the press. Upon learning of Miss Fu's betrayal, the grandfather scolds her and removes her from her position as vice president. Yun is thrilled, but Chubei informs her that he didn't help her for free. So he invites her to have dinner with him, to which she reluctantly agrees. During their dinner, Sahan unexpectedly arrives, and Yun is delighted to see him. However, the rivalry between the two guys makes her feel uncomfortable. It's the restaurant's anniversary, so they offer them 2 headbands for couples. Chubei instantly puts them on, but Sahan isn't far behind and puts on the other one. Later at home, Sahan gives Yun the headband, and she's overjoyed. At that moment, they both decide to dissolve their contract and become a real couple. They decide to sleep together, and she takes him by surprise by hugging him affectionately. The next day, Yun visits her mother in the hospital, where her aunt and cousin also show up. They have heard about her rich boyfriend and try to take advantage of her, but Yun kicks them out. After this, our heroine decides to reveal her relationship with Sahan to her mother, who is thrilled and wants to meet him. However, her aunt and cousin don't give up and they go to Sahan's house, pretending to be Yun's family and asking for money. But Sahan sees through their scheme and shoves them away. After that, Yun informs Sahan that she doesn't want to keep lying to his kind grandfather anymore. However, he informs her that his grandpa has a heart problem and it will be difficult to tell him, so they must wait for the right time. The next morning, Yun is taken aback to discover that her aunt and cousin are now working as house servants. It turns out Miss Fu hired them. When the grandfather arrives, they introduce themselves as Yun's family, leaving him utterly confused because Yun is supposed to be the daughter of the wealthy Yen family. Because of this, Yun finally comes clean about her true identity, but her relatives keep demanding money, which angers Grandpa even more. Moments later, Sahan arrives to defend Yun, and he takes the blame upon himself. This deeply upsets the grandfather, who asks Yun to leave immediately and then falls unconscious. In a rush, they get him to the hospital. Later, Sahan confronts Miss Fu, accusing her of causing the accident 7 years ago. But Miss Fu arrogantly denies his accusations, claiming he has no way to prove anything, and walks away. A while later, Yun tearfully informs Sahan that she's ending their relationship. She tells him that she loves him, but his grandfather needs him now more than ever. Sahan tries to change her mind, but she decides to leave the house. Later, when Yun's mother notices her sadness, she comforts her by saying that couples often have to fight for the happy ending they dream of. On the other hand, Sahan confesses everything to his grandfather, admitting that it was all his idea and how he's actually in love with Yun. However, his grandfather asks him to choose between Yun and his position as the company's heir. In the meantime, Chubei tries to get closer to Yun, but she firmly turns him down. Just then, Sahan arrives and asks for a private conversation. There, he shares with Yun about his grandfather's ultimatum and says that he's chosen her because he can't imagine life without her. Suddenly, he stands up, much to the shock of our heroine, and reveals the truth about his accident. He discloses that it was his aunt who caused the accident due to her greed. He also says that Miss Fu is not his real aunt, since she was adopted by his grandfather. Sahan admits that Yun is the only one who's brought him happiness during his darkest times and pleads with her not to leave him alone. Moved by his words, she hugs him tightly and they kiss each other. Later on, Yun confronts Miss Fu, revealing that when Sahan traveled to the US, he met someone who was present on the day of the accident. She then shows a flash drive, claiming it contains all the evidence proving that Miss Fu is responsible for the accident. In response, Miss Fu angrily breaks the flash drive and finally confesses to all her crimes. She admits that she wanted to kill him to take control of the company. At that moment, the grandfather enters the scene, having overheard Miss Fu's confession. He is deeply disappointed in her and declares that she is no longer his daughter and cuts all ties with her. After this, Miss Fu is arrested and ends up in jail for her crimes. Later on, Yun tells Sahan that his grandfather must be very sad about what happened. So he tells her that they should both try to make him happy. He then surprisingly kneels before her and asks her to marry him. She accepts his proposal with joy, and they seal their engagement with a sweet kiss. In the final scene, the eagerly awaited day arrives with the blessing of their beloved mother and grandfather. Yun and Sahan both look stunning and in love when they walk down the aisle, and the story concludes as they happily get married.